What is trauma to children? Trauma, as most people listen to the word, is big and dramatic. But in fact, trauma is any experience that brings up fear and concern in a child. And consistent trauma will bring out consistent adaptive behaviors. And those adaptive behaviors are not always desirable. So if you're in a relationship that has a high conflict level and that conflict is ongoing, that's going to create a certain level of trauma for your children. Today, we're going to talk about trauma, particularly for children from the ages of birth to 6 years old, basically preschool children. And the context here is people getting divorced or recently divorced. So what are some of the behaviors that you can expect from a traumatized child or a child who's going through continuous trauma? They're going to be sort of what we're familiar with in the world of conflict, which is fight or flight, or they might be freeze. But I'm going to break it up for the sake of argument here into fight or flight. So on the fight side, actually on both sides, either way, the child is fearful. When parents are fighting, when parents are in disagreement, or even living in separate households and saying things that are negative about the other parent, that is disturbing to the child, obviously. And very often when parents are getting divorced or in high conflict, the last thing they think about is how they're disturbing the child, or they see it and it's painful for them, but they can't get past it because they're going through their own emotions. So what's going on for that child is they become fearful and they're going to cry more than usual. If they're on the fight side of things, they're going to scream more than usual. They're going to have fits. It's going to be hard for you to calm your child down. They're going to have increases in temper tantrums. They might have changes in eating habits. They might have changes in sleeping patterns, and they're probably going to have nightmares. Now, on the flight side, if they tend to go inward instead of outward, they're going to become unusually withdrawn and quiet. They're going to get really quiet. They're going to startle more easily. They're going to develop new fears that they didn't have before, completely off the wall stuff. They're going to go back to behaviors that they once outgrew, like maybe sucking their thumb or being afraid of the dark or something like that. Or maybe if they had an imaginary friend and that friend went away for a while, that imaginary friend is going to come back. They might, on either side, complain of headaches or stomach aches, but that tends to be more on the withdrawn side. And the reason for that is children who externalize their fear in the form of acting out, they're expressing that feeling by sharing it in the only way they know how, by screaming, by being hard to calm down, by temper tantrums, that kind of thing. But when a child internalizes those feelings, it manifests more in their body. They're holding on to those feelings. Those feelings are getting locked up in their body. So they might complain of headaches or stomach aches. They might start wetting the bed. They definitely are going to have some trouble separating from one of the parents, if not both of them, because they're afraid that if they're not there, something's going to happen. They're going to continue to ask many questions about the incident, or they might even start asking about death over time, because when things become inconsistent and shaky, they start to wonder what's next. Something that we might see on both sides, but again, this is going to be more on the repressed side, is that they continue to recreate an incident that they are seeing repeatedly over and over. So what I have a client experiencing right now is their child is internalizing some of the behavior that their co-parent is exhibiting. I'm hesitating to say co-parent because the other parent isn't really participating. So the co-parent has some critical behavior of the person I'm working with, and that child is starting to express those criticisms in the same way with the same words. So they're taking in these behaviors and starting to express them as their own. These are all signs in a preschool child that there's a level of trauma going on, and it's a big red flag, because what you think is, you think that you're going to end the trauma. You know what? We're going to get divorced, or we're going to get separated, or he's going to move out, or she's going to move out, and this will be over. But actually, it isn't over, because for the child, the trauma is just beginning. Are you hearing what I'm saying to you? Once the parents are separated and there's some form of agreement, that doesn't end the trauma. Unless both parents are on the same page, unless both parents have some understanding that they're going to keep the child at the center and really focus on this child and keep their own stuff about each other to themselves and save it for their interactions away from their children, process it with other people, a counselor, a therapist, a coach, whatever, then that child is going to continue to experience trauma, and these symptoms are going to get worse. They're going to become either more aggressive or more repressed. And the statistics show that children post-divorce, in that first year post-divorce, actually have a higher possibility of being physically ill, of mental illness. At this age, we're not going to see addiction, and we're not really going to see suicide, but we might see self-destructive behaviors emerge. It's all from that ongoing tension. Even though the parents are separated, what these children are experiencing is a complete shift in their lifestyle. Suddenly, their home is not what it was. Both parents aren't living there. Both parents are angry. Both parents are going through change. Both parents they're not getting the kind of consistent care they used to. They may go stay with one parent, and that parent has to go, and there's a babysitter. That's probably going to happen with both parents. This is a huge change for these children. So if you're concerned that your child is experiencing trauma and you're thinking that it's over, don't be so quick to jump to that conclusion, because the trauma is ongoing. And once that trauma is present, unless special action is taken, and I'm not just talking about therapy for the child, that trauma can hang out and be residual. What we're looking for here is we're looking to build resilience in the child. So resilience is the ability to bounce back. Think of resilience as bounce back from that trauma. Resilience is the ability to take that trauma and over time make it an asset. Resilience is the ability to understand the trauma, understand that that trauma is not about who you are, and to not internalize it, to understand that trauma isn't even necessarily about people outside of you, so you're not going to stop, you're going to be less outgoing, outgoing is not the word I'm looking for, less hostile, screaming, acting out, and achieve some level of normalcy. So for the acting out child, we want to have them understand that the trauma wasn't about who they are, emotionally understand it, not just intellectually, and process it. We want them to understand that contextually, there may be worse traumas in the world. We want them to understand that there are still possibilities for them, even with the new situation. And with the child who's really internalized things, we want them to come out more with the same realizations, the same understanding that it's not about who they are. It really has nothing to do with who they are. It's circumstantial between the parents, and that the parents will be able to move on from where they are to a new place. Now, of course, this is much more difficult if one parent is very toxic and not changing, and that does happen from time to time. And there is no magic wand for fixing that. So that may be a situation where you're going to have what's called parallel parenting. You've got one parent who's maybe very self-centered and angry and narcissistic and blameful. The other parent is going to need to counterbalance that. They're going to need to counterbalance that by being the rock for this child, the nurturer, the available one, by tolerating that child is going to go through all kinds of negative behaviors, trying on what the other parent is doing to see if it fits, trying on what the rock is doing to see if it fits. That child will eventually hit a point where developmentally they're ready to make a decision about what's best for them. So for the rock, for the parent who's the nurturer, who's always on their best behavior, always saying good things about this other parent, even though they're very toxic and on a totally, hopefully parallel, maybe different parenting style, for the nurturer, there could be years of being in this child's corner, years of being there for them, years of being present for them, years of counterbalancing. I was talking to a client today of saying, not only is that rock, that nurturer, cleaning up their own side of the street, but very often they're cleaning off the residual emotion, cleaning out the residual emotion that the toxic parent is leaving in that child after they spend time with them. And at some point, that child is going to cognitively be able to sort out, all right, what works in my life, what doesn't? What's going to take me where I want to go in my life and what doesn't? And when there is a solid parent who's been practicing resilience with their child, teaching them how to approach life, how to see life in a larger picture, to understand that there's opportunity, to understand that things happen and we can recover, and even use those occurrences that seem so threatening and scary for our advantage over time. When you have a parent who's teaching those skills of resilience to their child, that child will come through successfully in the long run. So you get to decide, if you're seeing these signs, what do you want to do about it? Yes, therapy is a great idea. Yes, getting help for your child is a great idea. And getting help for yourself so that you can be in your child's corner is going to make a huge difference too. So look for opportunities to learn more about child resilience. This is something at Rich in Relationship we're very deeply grounded in. We're running workshops on child resilience, particularly for parents who are recently divorced or divorcing. Click on the Contact Us button, or if there's a schedule a meeting button, click on that and talk to us, and let's see where you are and what resources we can provide you with. And remember, there's always hope as long as at least one of the parents is willing to be there 100%. So click through now.